As we commemorate Youth Day, it seems pretty obvious to almost everybody that the biggest problem facing our society and most young people is that there are no jobs available for them. As a result, they have very little prospects of working for money and not able to create a sustainable income for themselves. You know, all the problems that flow from this, and you know how difficult and how impossible it is to build a life when you just don't have money. Clotilde Angelucci is the acting head of Youth Capital. Clotilde, good afternoon to you. How does youth unemployment in our country almost define the lives of so many of our young people this Youth Day?
Yeah, we've seen that 1 in 2 young people between the ages of 15 and 34 are not in employment. And we've also seen recently that the Basic Education Employment Initiative Phase 5 was launched, and 1.9 million young people applied for 200,000 opportunities. So it's clear that young people want to work, but it also seems like the government is treating unemployment as a shock and not like the systemic crisis that it's defining a generation, more than one generation of South Africans.
I mean, there's so many sort of big things you can say about this, that the number of people who don't have jobs has been rising in South Africa since the 1970s. There was a very small blip in the early 2000s, but apart from that, it's always been rising. The other is that it's regionalized. Our neighbors, Eswatini, Namibia, Botswana, Mozambique, all face the same problem that we do. I mean, clearly there's something going on in Southern Africa that we need to look at.
Yes, and I think the thing is that there are lessons that we can learn for the past 10 years, but it seems that our approach continues to be business as usual. So we've seen with a lot of stats say, for example, that 6 in 10 young people have never had a formal work before. So work experience seems to be a great blocker, like a challenge. And this is not a challenge that just the government can solve, but we need to bring on board the private sector and like multi-stakeholders. So we know where young people are held back, but we just need to make sure that that knowledge is brought into practice. And one of the things that we've seen in the last couple of years, it's been like a cut in funding. For example, the funding for public employment programs that have provided young people with work experience has gone down, has dwindled. So we also need to ask ourselves, are we ready to put our mouth where the money is?
I mean, government keeps talking about this, and more government talks about it. In a way, I sometimes think it's almost forced to. For years, when unemployment numbers have been released by Statistics South Africa, there's silence from government. You make the point that they're almost treating it like it's a shock. I mean, what I've never understood is that in any democracy anywhere in the world, the more jobs you create, the more votes you'll get.
Yeah, and that can be a way, and I think we've seen it before elections this year with some like programs or interventions being launched provincially just before elections. But I think something that we need to also remember is that we've had interventions in our government. Look, for example, at the employment tax incentive that hasn't been. So it's really important to see what our door in is, and like how do we start opening doors for young people. We've seen that 50% of our working age population are young people. So it's not just a question for social needs, it's also a question of who's going to buy your products in the next 5 or 10 years.
There are other issues. I mean, there's the Youth Employment Service, there's the Nasi Spani program in Gauteng. Are they making any difference?
So the public employment programs have proven their impact in providing young people with work experience and really bridging the transition between the world, where they're at and the transitioning with the world of work. But we must remember that young people are not heterogeneous. We have different kinds of young people. There's young people who've dropped out in high school. There's young people who've graduated, and we've seen the graduate employment also going up. The only problem is that once young people complete these short-term interventions, we need to have pathways into our economy. And Stephen, we've seen that our economy has been sluggish. In the last 10 years, we've averaged 1% growth. So it's really difficult to put the burden on young people to create their own jobs if there's no money in communities to be spent.
Okay, there are all sorts of ways that people are looking at this and trying to do something about it. My real fear is that actually the root of this is in our education system, which I fear may have betrayed many young South Africans. And what makes me so scared about that is that you have to change the education system first, which means it takes a long time. I realize there's some improvements in our education system, but I mean, if education is the problem, we're looking at a lost generation almost.
Well, I think young people can't wait, and as Youth Capital, we've said it and we've echoed over and over again. There definitely needs to be different strategies. There needs to be like a short-term intervention. So, as you said, education, focusing at how TVETs are working. How can we bring the private sector more into signaling what are the skills that we need to grow our economy, and again, like fortifying these public employment interventions, just to make sure that they provide pathways into the economy, but at the same time, relooking at the basic education system. And I think we need to remember that polls results show that 8 in 10 grade 4 learners in South Africa couldn't read or write for meaning. So I think something that we've seen recently is the concept of social work. How can we promote employment for young people to fill social needs? Because there seems to be a scarcity of jobs, but there's a lot of work to be done in our communities. So really doubling where we can put young people's talent to work while meeting the socioeconomic needs of our community is going to be really, really key.
And Clotilde, there was a big debate last week sparked by a conversation that Gerrie Fourie, the CEO of Capitec, had. He said that we've been sort of defining unemployment in the wrong way. His point is that many people have informal jobs. I mean, we know about our informal sector, and that's not being measured properly. Stats SA came back and said, no, they use an international definition of unemployment. And in fact, they asked people, did you do anything for money? And they identified themselves as not having a job. Does that argument help us in any way? Could it actually be a distraction, or could it help us to focus on the real problem, perhaps?
I think as Youth Capital, we would like to encourage the same level of discussion towards funding alternative support for micro enterprises. So I think the same focus and passion should go into saying, how do we make sure that people that are trying to make money in the informal economy can be supported? And does it count, counting it differently, does it really change the job crisis? That's kind of a question that we would like to put back.